This week on the Stereo Image, we are blessed to have with us the great Rob Zabrecky. One of the highlights of my entire 25-year career with Penn and Teller has been watching him work. And thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Jonesy, it is great to be here.
Well, I'm telling you, as you can imagine, I see a lot of magic. And I came to it very late in life because I was already pushing 40 when I started working with Penn and Teller, and enjoyed magic but knew nothing about it. And now I know so much more than I ever thought I would. And I've seen so many more magicians through all the seasons of Fool Us and all the other things at the Magic Castle, and I saw you and I flipped. You were just doing shit that blew my mind. Your presentation is so, I'm not going to use the term that I'm sure everybody uses because it's not really true, but a lot of people say, "Oh, he's quirky." You know what I mean? It's so much deeper than that. I mean, you've got it down. You've got this your whole act is so hip and so wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Well, I figured I'd go on for another 40, 50 minutes of this, blowing you on air, and then we'll take it from there. But no, I want to add, well, first of all, I want to I congratulate you on your new big special, the Rob Zabrecky Hour on the Amazon is where I got it, and it's just great. It was so great to see that show because I didn't get to see it when you were doing it a couple of years ago. Talk to us a little bit about what went into that besides having to work with John Lovick.
Boy, let's just avoid that topic altogether.
I love John. I mean,
but you know what? Let's rewind to the word quirky because it's interesting. It's a word that we often use to describe music, any art. So many things. And in my case, magic. It's when something's not easily identifiable, you can easily say, "Oh, well, Monk was quirky in his delivery," right? That's probably a word that was used to describe him. But yeah, it's more than that, and it's an easy thing to say it's not what you think it is, right? So you think of rock and roll, you think of the Beatles and the Stones, but you might not think about Frank Zappa or
no.
Or what Yoko and John were doing in the late 60s. Very different approach to it. And you could certainly qualify, that they were probably, Yoko probably got called quirky a lot throughout her. Yeah. So I take it as a compliment. It's a nice lead into a way to say this isn't the standard version of this.
Right.
So thank you for that. And then, 20 years of doing anything is a really long time. And in particular, in act, this is something, the Zabrecky Hour that you saw is a combination of a dozen or so magic routines in generally that particular order. The furniture gets moved around, obviously, depending on, where I'm performing or, some of that stuff changes. But generally, that was the act. If I got hired to do a festival, a convention, a theater show, that would have been it. And if I was doing a chunk of that, it would have been the first quarter or the last quarter, maybe the middle section. So that is the act as it was known. And it was time, you do something for that long and you go, well, in music, you would record it. You would say, okay, this is my new album and here it is. Give it, love it or hate it. Right. It's a thing and you can wrap it up and package it up and send it out. But in magic, it's very different, because magic's an ephemeral thing. It's meant to, as you well know, it's much preferred to be seen on stage rather than, recordings of music sound great in your car and you can jump around and get on a dance floor and get off on music in a million ways. But magic is different. You're watching it, you're at home and you're not there in the theater. You're not feeling that space. It's kind of like watching a play in some ways.
It really is. And that's something that doesn't get enough, people don't talk about that enough. With music, it's much more movable, but there is also I mean, I've sat in the room, with Sonny Rollins playing,
Oof.
and you're never gonna get that experience no matter how many Sonny Rollins albums you buy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's it's the hair on the back of your neck standing up when you're really fooled, or, an audience member says something and you've got a great comeback. All of those things add to the so putting it on, yeah, but you guys did a great job. I mean, it feels really authentic, like you're almost in the room when watching this special,
Well,
so
thanks a lot. We by design, I wanted to have an experience going into the venue is and it's not a spoiler alert, but if you watch the special, you'll see me walking into what's the Hayworth Theater in LA,
Mhm,
known as Dynasty Typewriter. That's the name of it's the
mhm,
Hayworth Dynasty Typewriter at the Hayworth Theater. So it's
okay.
got two names, which are slightly confusing because people don't know if it's one or the other, but it's both. And
Mhm,
so you kind of see me walk into the theater, do the show, and then at the end exit the theater. So I did try to give the
right.
viewers that thing. The other thing I want to add to that, and you're talking about like being in a room with Sonny Rollins or listening to music live or going to see an art show or in the room versus looking at it
Mhm,
in a book in your under your covers in home or whatever
right.
is when you tape a magic show you because they by nature we bring people on stage unless you're doing everything in one, and most people do have we're bringing up spectators.
Right.
So suddenly those people are our co-stars. Those people are
Mhm.
percussionists, are back singers,
Sure.
auxiliary. Sure, they're not taking up
Right.
it's hopefully more still about you, but you're bringing these people up and you're filming this stuff, so they're locked into their one time on stage is immortalized in as long as
Yes.
these things live. Like a live audience, you record like listening to Kiss Alive 1 or 2, you hear all those screams from all those people. That wouldn't be the same every night. Those, even those I think a lot of
Right.
those were added. But it was a post thing, but in our case, when you film a live thing, it's not, and luckily,
Right.
I the people that I brought up, I we taped 2 shows that night, and we cut them together and kinda
Mhm.
used the best people, and, I got really lucky, and the people that I brought up, I was happy that they didn't know them per
Yeah.
se. It was kinda like, "Alright, let's see how this goes," and so I think that's for the next time if I consider doing another magic special, it might be more everything in one because you have control
Wow.
over, I can stand there, and we can light me a certain way, I can do an effect, and it's gonna be a certain
Yep.
thing, but you don't know what you're gonna get.
No, and I mean, obviously, a lot of audience participation in the Penn and Teller show every night, and, I mean, it's funny that we're talking about this because it literally was 3 days ago or 4 days ago. Penn had broken his ankle and he's back now and he's walking without the boot, and he said, "I got out and I'm feeling pretty comfortable and everything's pretty good." And then he called this woman for a bit, and she was abhorrent. I mean, she was literally trying to sabotage the bit at every turn, and really argumentative and really unpleasant, and it's very rare in 25 years that I've seen him actually kick someone off the stage, and he finally did. He had his breaking point. He brought it, I mean, 10 minutes he tried to bring it around, and
Uh-huh.
How skilled Penn is with audience management. I mean, there's nobody better that I've seen, and because you get a lot of people partying in Vegas and a lot of alcohol induced and marijuana induced splendor going on, and you're trying to work with them, and he's a master at that, and she just wouldn't give an inch. She was just horrible, and he's just so I understand that, and you're lucky. Yeah, people you had up for the show, the Zabrecky Hour, were wonderful, and, they did a great job. So,
Well, thanks.
but
Yeah, I wish I was there to see Penn, get rid of the spectator. Handles it different, that when you're up there as a magician and they see you as an artist in some form or another, the second you turn to authority, cop, security
Mhm.
guard, it's the dynamic changes between you and the
It
audience.
does, and I mean, luckily, and one of Penn's great skills is he was able to, I mean, by the time he kicked her off the stage, the audience was begging for her to be kicked off the stage.
Yeah, I would
So
suspect
he didn't
yes.
lose anyone,
Mhm. Yeah.
Um anyhow, well, we're just getting started, but, because there's so much to unpack here, but as they say, as the kids say. Um, but, I wanna talk to you, at being a musician myself, about, the whole Possum Dixon, experience and how I mean, you guys really influenced a lot of heavy players, and you really were a big thing. What how did that all come about?
Well, it came about through just a childhood love of music.
Well,
Growing up,
that's yeah, we should do that. We should talk a little bit. Where'd you grow up, and
yeah,
what
it's,
led you to all that stuff?
Southern California. Grew up born and raised in Burbank, California.
Mhm, mhm,
And, just the love of listening to, mom's AM radio and hearing the Carpenters and
mhm,
ELO and all those, Steely Dan, all those soft hits coming through the radio, and just feeling like that was the great escape for me.
mhm,
I think
mhm,
a lot of kids in magic had the trick or the thing that drove them to, become magicians. For me, it was music was just so absolutely freeing, and those
mhm.
worlds, these it was the worlds of adults, and that they live these sexy lives of, pina coladas and getting caught in the rain, and like, "What is that?"
Oh.
I can't wait to grow up. And then that just led to, by the time I was 12, I think my family took a trip to the UK, and in 1980,
Mhm.
discovered what was going on with, new wave and punk rock and stuff like
Right,
that. And that was a major turning point, because that music was so different than, you know, ELO,
right.
Carpenter,
Yeah,
Deep
then
Picture, bands like that.
Rupert Holmes.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, but exactly. Wow, that deep cut.
Yeah,
But the similarities were, even a group like Dead Kennedys would have verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus.
right,
Holiday in Cambodia has a similar structure than Cheap Trick's "I Want You to Want Me,"
right.
and that I got immediately. I'm like, "Oh, I can hum these songs, and I don't know what all these messages are." Some of the political leanings were heavy,
Mhm.
but there were bands like, Black Flag, that just had a guttural, I
Right.
hate the world, I'm gonna have a nervous breakdown and fix my head, and, like, all these really primal things that as a teen, you go, "Yep,
Yeah,
that's
yep.
it." And
Mhm.
there was a pivotal moment. My brother, who's 6 years older than me, one afternoon, he's holding up these records, and he had Styx, Pieces of Eight, and Kansas, Point of No Return, and Ted Nugent, Double Live Gonzo, and he's like, "Robbie, this is the future of rock and roll. These are the records that shape your life." And I looked at him, and I said, "No, they're not."
Yeah, yeah.
Found my I had For some reason, that other music spoke to me so deeply that I was like, this was and up until that point, your older brother,
Oh,
you get
sure, you yeah.
bounce, and you learn the homework from him, and you kinda try to do what he's doing, but that was a point where I went, "Nope, I don't think
Yeah.
so."
No,
And
my older brother was 5 years older than me,
oh, right.
and,
Okay.
and I was born in '62, so he was born in '57, and, you know, for me, it was, my brother was the first guy he mowed lawns for a summer at the cemetery to get enough money to buy a stereo,
Yeah.
and he bought a Kenwood stereo, um, and, uh, and the first records he bought were, like, Leonard Skinner, the 2-record live set,
Oh, yeah.
and, an ELO best of, record,
Yep.
and a Steely Dan album, and, um, and he was playing these I mean, I grew up listening to Ella and Frank Sinatra, and my dad was a huge jazz fan, and we had player pianos in my house, and so
Uh,
music was all around, and I'd already been playing the piano. I started when I was 3. So I was already, like, too hip for the room, with pop music. I was listening to, Milt Jackson, but my friends were all listening to Led Zeppelin, and I'm listening to Oscar Peterson. And I came around and I was playing in rock bands and I was and my but my brother, all of a sudden he comes home one day with the Sex Pistols album,
mhm.
and
Yeah.
he's like, I don't know if this is great or horrible, but I like it." And, and that was a big turning point because again, he was 20 years old in '77.
Oh,
So,
perfect age, right?
um,
Happened in
you know
the right
yeah,
time and
yeah,
understand all that music,
um,
yeah. And
but,
what did how did that record sound to you when you first heard it?
I thought it sounded, pretty amateurish. You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Yep.
But then I realized what it was, and I would say by the time I'd heard it like 3 or 4 times, I was like, "Oh, I get what they're doing now." You know what I mean? This is a statement. This is art. This isn't, I don't have to analyze this like I would a Bach chorale, you
Yeah.
know? And once you put that away, music becomes, you open yourself up to a lot more things. I mean, Duke Ellington famously said there's two kinds of music, good and bad. Um, and it's true. I mean, I started by the time I was in my early 20s, I was listening to some country western stuff that I would have all just laughed off and then all of a sudden I got into Hank Williams and I got into Patsy Cline and I got into, and I mean, and I'm not a country fan, but I appreciate the great music that came out of Bob Wills and came out of, you know, um, I think that it's really important to not limit yourself. And today, without going down the old man route, everything is so curated and everything is sort of, you know, laser focused at every demographic that, you can't find, it's rare to find a 12-year-old that even knows who the Beatles are anymore, because they just aren't exposed to it. And when we were kids, you're younger than me, obviously, but when we were kids, everything was going to the record store and just going through piles of records that you had no idea what you were gonna see. And all
Yes.
of a sudden, you'd pick up a Steel Eye Span album because it was next after Steely Dan, and you think, "This is a cool cover, maybe I'll buy this for 99 cents and see if it's any good," you know? Um, but anyways, so you grew up, you music was a huge influence on you
It was
from.
everything. It's what got me out of bed. It's what I went to bed to. It was literally, pre-MTV. It was like it just
Wow.
guided it just made me feel good. It was the one thing that
Uh-huh.
I really, really connected to. An awkward kid growing up, not great at sports and just like
Mhm.
but I was the kid in my grade school. People go, "Oh, Robbie Zabrecky knows about Cheap Trick or Aerosmith
Right.
or, Blondie or whatever." I
Yeah.
I did become that person, and that which was I felt that gave me my first sense of sort of importance, and
And
then Oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, were you taking lessons or anything?
No,
Or
so I hadn't played a stitch of music yet,
oh,
and
okay.
so in the early
Wow.
'80s, again, growing up in SoCal, like most kids, I took up surfing for 2, 3 years.
Sure.
And it was a terrible time to be a surfer, I'll tell you. In the early 1980s in California, the surfboards were short. They'd gone from the longboards that we all know, the
Uh-huh.
Beach Boys and kind of a very kind of relaxed, vibe to very aggressive, spoiled teenagers who had these little surfboards with bright colored wetsuits that were just
Uh-huh.
ripping and tearing through these waves at a very fast pace. And if you weren't expert level or a local, you quite frankly could get, your ass beat or
Right.
kicked out of the water. And one day I got punched and got called a Val because I was with a bunch of kids from
Oh,
Burbank. And so like I saw that firsthand, but yet I wanted to be a surfer deeply because I mean, a lot of the music. There was a band called the Surf Punks out of
right,
LA.
sure.
Which actually
Yeah.
Dennis Dragon, whose uh, older
Yeah,
sister, Captain Tennille. There's a Captain and
yeah,
Tennille.
yeah, Daryl Dragon and Tony Tennille.
That's right,
Um,
yeah, Daryl Dragon. So yeah, so there was a
yeah.
connection there, but their first record I thought was great, and
Mhm.
bands like Suburban Lawns talked about surfing and Red Cross, all kinds of there was like references, and
Mhm.
Rodney Bingenheimer, being the DJ here in California, on early KROQ was the radio station.
Right.
Saturday and Sunday nights he'd be playing all these great songs, and you're like, wow, so surf culture was a part of that. So diving into it, got really into it, and then hated it because of the way that I felt like I wasn't, living 30 miles from the beach. It's hard. You're not going every day. So
Right.
you're going once a week, twice a week at best, maybe a few
Mhm.
times a month, sometimes, every few months. So not being a great surfer, I was like, I got my surfboard and a wetsuit in the corner over there next to a bunch of records. And one day I was hanging out with a buddy of mine and he had a hollow body, like a Silvertone bass.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, "Hey, you wanna trade the bass for the surfboard? It's only got 4 strings. I could probably figure something out on that." Like, "I wanna
That's a
surf." So it was like
yeah.
clean swap. Neither of us looked back. He became a pretty good surfer,
Mhm.
and I figured out the Peter Gunn theme on
Right.
opening, the
Yeah,
that
yeah.
easy riff that we all learned, and Batman, which is that chromatic, that
Right.
simple if you could just go like this, that you know, Batman, and then move it up a fourth and do
Uh-huh.
the 12-bar blues and you're good. So, I realized I didn't have any more talent than anybody. In fact, I realized I probably had a moderate amount of, like, I could snap my fingers, and I had a
Mhm.
reasonable sense of timing, not a good sense, and not none of this came was like fish to water, but I was like, I was good enough to
Right,
where I got together, found a guitar player, lived a few blocks over, who had the same, now we're getting into, like, Echo and the Bunnymen and the Smiths and
right.
Bauhaus and bands like that, so we're kind of calling up covers that are easy to perform and, riffs like Peter Gunn, right? We're playing that for
Mhm.
20 minutes, and drummer who could, was holding pretty good time. So that was it, at 16,
Wow.
we had a band called the Castaways and, played one concert and, one a couple backyard parties and a little show in North Hollywood, and that was it. Fast forward to 21, I it kind of gone through, high school and what was the beginning of what should have been my college years. But
Mhm.
instead of going to college, I helped out two friends open up a coffee house, in LA.
Okay.
And I gotta tell you a little bit about this coffee house because now they're every we s coffee
Right.
house is, you see it, there's Starbucks is a thing, and of course, there's coffee houses everywhere. But in the late '80s, it was a subculture. You gotta remember that hair metal's still going on the Sunset Strip. You know,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
we're still, like, way pre-Nirvana. Alternative
Mhm.
rock is still, like, a little freaky thing, like,
Right.
sure, REM had made, big splashes and the
Mhm.
Husker doing the Replacements, bands like that, but it wasn't a household term as we know it now with, Green Day and a
Sure.
million other bands that helped commercialize it in fine ways,
Mhm.
but the underground culture was very different, and so this coffee house that, I helped my friends open became a mecca for touring bands that were real indie rock. Before that, it was even a term, but
Sure, a term, yeah.
Matador Records, Drag City,
Mhm.
Amphetamine Reptile, a lot of noise, kind of avant-garde noise and rock and punk,
Mhm.
all that kind of fused. All these bands started coming to this place. The place was called Jabberjaw. It was down in a desolate strip on Pico,
Okay.
and, Nirvana played there very early on,
Wow.
just as their record Nevermind came out. Iggy Pop's there to watch, and it's, kinda like
Wow.
it was a thing,
Yeah.
so I was watching all this stuff unfold and working there and curating the art shows and booking the bands who were playing there very early on. Hole was Courtney Love and Company
Yep.
were they rehearsed there during the day,
Wow.
and it was which was its own form of that's another podcast talk. But
But in you're 21 at this point?
20 and
22?
21, yeah, yeah.
Booking wow, this is great. Yeah, yeah.
These was like these are what I considered my college years. My parents would have liked
Right.
it if I went to UCLA and became a
Mhm.
teacher. That would have been I would
Oh,
have
yeah,
been
yeah.
son of the year. But instead, I was like I knew that I really wanted to be a part of the LA underground and make a mark in some small I just wanted to I just admired that world so much.
Right,
I
right.
wanted to make an impact on it. So, started my band Possum Dixon in 1989, and
Mhm,
we did shows. We had one show with Hole that year,
mhm.
open just playing with a million bands that we kind of admired, and it was like it was a scene, and
Right, sure.
um, we dreamed that it would have been close to what was going on at CBGB Max's Kansas City in the seven. It was
Mhm.
nothing close to it, or as close comparing ourselves to, Paris in the 20s or what,
Yeah, right, right, right.
you
Yeah,
know,
the
uh
Algonquin Round Table.
yeah, exactly. We're Dadaists, we're like,
Yeah,
we're we're in the, Cabaret Voltaire or something. But
sure.
no, and you're like, it wasn't that great. It was pretty good.
It sounds I mean, in retrospect, it certainly sounds really good. You know
It
what I
was
mean? It's
well,
gotta
thank
be.
yeah, the thing that tipped the scales for us was when we started getting because we were young, we're 20 and 21, but the people that started coming around that club were some of the members from the first wave punk scene in LA, bands like The Germs and
Mhm.
X and,
Right.
kind of these heavy players that we thought, "Wow, if those guys came down here, then we'd really be cool."
Yeah, yeah.
Bands like Red Cross, and there's a
Mhm.
whole world of that, and it all collided there, and right at
Wow.
a time when I'm forming my band, and it's like I have a million ideas about how I want music to go, and was influenced by the early John Waters films
Oh,
deeply at
sure.
that point.
Yep.
So, Pink Flamingos and Female
Yeah.
Trouble, all that kind of stuff was like I wanted to have slash performance art music thing. So there's people playing pots and pans, and it's just chaotic noise. And I've got a wig on and rolling around the stage, and it was a disaster. And people didn't love it. I can't say it was great, but it was a launch. It was like, this is what I'm gonna. This is my path, you know.
Right.
That eventually refined itself to more or less a rock format, a group, bass, guitar, drums, vocals. Me as kind of the songwriter, and we're pulling in bands that we love, like Wall of Voodoo or Camper Van Beethoven, Violent Femmes, just kind of quirky music, as people.
Yeah.
That's what the LA Weekly. Oh, the quirky band, Possum Dixon. And at that point, I had a stand-up bass. I was playing with a bow, and in several of the tunes, we just would have a middle section, and in that middle section was just like, let's just go John Cage,
Right.
Let's just go out there, and then we'll meet back on the verse and call it.
Wow.
And that was it. And that was a really interesting version of the group, and that got us in the papers, and we started doing shows with, X and the Meat Puppets and all these kind of alt groups that we had admired. And then it just refined it over time. We just kind of really locked into a sound of a rock group. And in the early 90s, bands were getting signed left and right. It was a big time after Nirvana's Nevermind.
Right.
It was alternative rock, was like, it was the new hair metal, but as far as the record companies went, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Every act, you don't have to be good. If you're an alt rock band, you're going to get at least a demo deal. People are going to want you. And all those bands signed, even the Butthole Surfers were on like A&M or Capitol or something like that.
Yeah.
So everyone's like cashing in for the big bucks. And we're like, well, everyone else is doing it. We like the ethos of the DIY worlds of, REM and the Replacements and all those.
Yeah.
We're going to do it. So we did. And we found a producer called Earl Mankey, who was in the band Sparks. He was a founding member of Sparks. And even before Sparks, they were known as Half Nelson.
Right.
So the Mayo brothers were kicking around UCLA in the early 70s, and Earl bailed out of. So he did the first one or two records, and then bailed out to produce, and had some success with Concrete Blonde.
Yep.
A lot of LA bands like the Dickies. He worked with the Runaways. Just a whole great, the 3 o'clock. I really got into the underground of he was kind of the producer. So we thought 2020 was a great band. There's a song called Yellow Pills, if you don't know it, by 2020. Highly recommend it.
Okay.
Really nice keyboard a lot of surprises. That it was like, you don't hear these things coming, but they kind of jump out at you. So we thought, we're going to make a LA record with Earl Mankey, and this will be the way to go. And we did that. And that was that was kind of the whole origin story of Possum. And then we jumped on tours and had some videos on MTV, and for 10 years did music doing that.
Wow. And did it just sort of, what happened to stop it? Did you get sick? Did you get sick of each other, or did I mean, I've been in a lot of bands, and they all break up at some point. You know what I mean? Unless you're smart enough to realize that you shouldn't. And it's always, creative differences or whatever. But a lot of times it's just, you can't stomach looking at the other guys again, what happened? Did it just sort of run its course, or was there a big blow up? Or
I think you could say run its course is a good way to describe it. And I wish I could say I was fed up with these guys, but they were my best friends. We were gone to high school and junior college together, and I love these guys deeply. And like every cliche rock band, I mean, there was drugs and use. I was a drug addict for the better part of that duration of the band, and at the end of it, I got off drugs, and I got sober, and it started relooking at life in a completely different way by getting sober, as people do.
Right.
And some of the other members didn't, and that was a real.
Sure. No, that's a huge, you can't. It never works.
No.
You know what I mean? And you've realized that it's really a waste of money in your life, and you're doing yourself physical harm. It's tough to then stand next to someone who's not willing to make that, it's not that you lose respect for them. It's just you feel sorry for them. and you
Yes.
can't talk them around, and you can't. I mean, again, we're not saying anything that we both don't know. We've been around the business for a long, long time, and there's so many. I mean, there's a drummer that you've heard of that everyone in the world's heard of, and I'm not going to mention his name, but I did sessions with him in the '80s, and it was every break they're out in the hallway doing lines of coke, and I mean, he's certainly sober now and fine, you know what I mean? But back then, I mean, I never got into it because I saw it, what it was doing to people. I mean, my hero, who was a great jazz pianist, Dave McKenna, he was a horrible drunk for most of his career, and I
Mhm.
saw what it did and the limits that it put on him, and I was like, I don't wanna do that, you know?
Glad you had the insight to see that and step away from it. You know
Yeah,
yeah.
what remember, when I was a kid, the drinking age was 18 in New York State,
Mhm.
and which meant that when we were 14, we were in the park drinking beer.
Yep.
And then I got a job in a really p popular rock band, like local band playing with these guys, and they're all like they all think that they're rock stars slugging Jack Daniels and stuff.
Sure.
And I thought, "No, this is stupid." And I just by the time I went to Berkeley, I had already outgrown that aspect of my life, you know what I mean? It was like, and the thing that killed it was I've told this story, I don't know if I've ever told it on here, but I I went to my friend's sister's wedding, and we decided to drink vodka martinis, and I woke up the next day to go on a 117-mile hike with my brother through the Adirondack Mountains, and I had a 70-pound pack on my back, and I'm
Okay.
throwing up, and he's leaving me behind,
Of
and
course.
I said, "I'm never drinking again." And that was in 1981. Um, and that was the end of it, and also when I found out that there's about the same amount of calories in a glass of scotch than there are in a piece of chocolate cake, I'll go for the chocolate cake every time, you know?
Good
And,
call.
but anyways, I've gotten off on a tangent, but so obviously that was all. I mean, your sobriety probably led a lot to this,
It
realization.
did, and, the thing I'll add to that, though, is I changed, the other guys didn't. So
Right.
they were carrying on as we did, and there was some terrible consequences from that,
Mhm.
incarceration and,
Mhm.
all the really bad stuff.
Right.
But when I changed, I was like, "Oh, well, I can't really do this anymore because this doesn't work for this new way that
Right.
I'm living and breathing and seeing the world." And then we're on tour in Baltimore, Maryland one summer in the mid-90s, and, we load our gear into a club, and I go walking through downtown Baltimore looking just I wanna see that where John Waters shot some of those early
Right.
movies.
Sure.
Like you
Yeah.
mentioned, he was a big influence. So I'm cruising around, and I see an air conditioner outside of a shop, and it was a magic store. And so I walked in and bought a trick, and, after I cooled off, I, bought something to be a, fair
Mhm.
patron, and, performed it that night at a little nightclub for a few hundred people, and it worked, and it was a weird anomaly, like, "What the fuck is this guy doing?" kinda thing. "What's the singer of
Right.
this band doing?" And then the next night, New York City, I'm like, "Hey, guys, 3rd song, tune up, I'm gonna do that thing again." So I do the trick again, and it worked just as fine. And then the tour finished in Manhattan, and we drove back 3,000 miles to LA. My girlfriend, who is now my wife,
Mhm.
managed the club, the Viper Room on the Sunset Strip at the time,
Mhm.
and that meant a lot of free tickets to a lot of free things. In every show we wanted to
Sure.
see, all kinds of great benefits from just her working there. And she said, "Hey, I have tickets to go to a wine tasting at a place called Magic Castle up in the Hollywood Hills. You
Oh,
wanna"
wow.
And I'm like, "Well, I love magic now. I can do one trick. Yeah,
Right.
let's go
Well,
see what this is
hold
about."
on. I don't wanna, but I do wanna interrupt you. Did you have any interest in magic, like, as a
No,
kid? No? This
God,
is, like,
no.
completely out of the blue from
So
buying one trick.
so out of the blue that my obsession with, bands like Cheap Trick and ELO and were
Mhm.
so huge that if I was to see a Siegfried and Roy special or one of those, Mark Wilson specials on TV, I would just run for the TV set and turn
Right.
the channel.
Sure.
Totally. I would say an aversion to it. Like, it
Right.
and I think because it was a purple fantasy jumpsuit world at that in the '70s with big
Sure.
boxes and things that like I just knew that I just looked at these are weird puzzles with music that I don't like, and these people look weird. I don't like,
Right.
you know,
Okay. That's
watch Jack or the
Coach.
Waltons over this.
Yeah. Beretta.
Exactly, or Columbo, or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So it was like anything was better than that.
Right.
I
Right. No,
didn't feel
that's okay, but that's a huge thing. I mean, so let's jump back up to where you were at. You bought your trick. You drove back to LA, and you're just about to go to the Magic Castle.
and I called together some weird I barely had a suit, you know, I'm sure it was some stinky old thrift store jacket with some weird tie, and my cute girlfriend who, you know, was managing this great
Sure.
night. And we walked in and fell in love with magic in
Wow.
such a way that it's undescribable. Well, the best way I can describe it to you in this podcast, it's like when you're a kid and you get a stack of records, right? And you're like,
Mhm.
oh, this producer worked with this. Oh, and this drummer was in this band, and you start kind of,
Mhm.
oh, this bands are on the same record label,
Right.
and but we're looking at, oh, there's Chung Ling Soo, there's Carter, there's Kuda
Right.
Lux, Bill Larson. How do all these puzzle pieces fit together?
Right. Right.
You know,
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me was when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. We went to some relative's wedding, and they
mhm.
had a live band, and I had never seen live musicians before, and it
Yeah.
blew my mind and changed my whole world, you know?
Yep.
How can they do this and make this sound that I hear out of my stereo in person, you know? And it was a huge thing for me. But
Yes,
and I'm assuming you've told, Randy this story of your first trip to the Magic Castle.
I'm not sure if I've told it to him. It's
He it's
I've written.
so I mean, he'll be so jacked by it, you know what
Yeah,
I mean? 'Cause
yeah,
it's exactly what you want everyone that goes there to experience, and
yes.
there you are, like, it's hitting you like a ton of bricks, basically.
A ton of
Um
bricks, but also at a time. So yeah, gotta go back to the time and place. We're looking at 96, 95, or maybe 96, 97, somewhere in there. And at that time, Magic Castle was very, very different than it is now. I know you
Oh,
don't live
yeah.
there that much,
Yep.
but I can tell you that back then, the average age was old.
Right. I
And,
know.
you know, Saturday night, it's at half capacity.
Right.
Everyone's got white hair.
Yep.
It's
Even even when I went there for the first time, probably in, like, 2002,
yep.
uh,
Mhm.
it was very much that, that kind of, wedding reception food, dried out, chicken, and it was guys too old to go on a cruise ship, because their health wouldn't permit it, you
Precisely.
know?
Yes.
And, of
Yep.
course, no women, you
No.
know?
Oh, no, no, no. It was everyone was it was a date. Women there weren't a lot of women even performing magic. It was very much this male dominant this sort
Yeah, really weird, like, old country club vibe.
yes.
Um,
And 0 but also to that, 0 hipsters. You
right.
had if you dare had showed a tattoo, that would have been, "Oh, wow." That would have
Oh,
been,
yeah, yeah.
"Should they come in?" This
Yeah,
degenerate.
exactly.
Uh, and we loved that those people weren't there because we're getting away from the rock and underground world going like, "And we've got a new haven. I'm sober. This place, you gotta put a tie on to come here." It's a
Mhm.
new we did discover it as an art form, and we labeled it as that. We knew that, like, okay, we aren't seeing a lot of good art, but it's here.
Mhm.
These acts are all, most of them, dated and not good. But when a good one would come on, you go, "Oh my god, they write, produce, direct, and act."
Sure.
They're specific, like a Cage record or a Monk
Yeah,
record
yeah, yeah.
or Coltrane or any
Right,
jazz.
no, no, I mean, I remember seeing Johnny Carney there,
There you
and
go.
just
Perfect.
and he's like, "Oh, wait a minute, this is what it can be." You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah,
Um
watching Mr. Misto is like
Oh,
it's like
yeah,
it's kinda like hearing that Sex Pistols record for the first time. You go, "Wait a second. This
right.
shouldn't make sense, but it does, and it's specific, and it's great, and it's surprising, and all that
Yeah.
it is just like it is really, incredible." And so John was one of the early ones that we'd seen, and
Mhm.
we're like, "Yep, who else is like that guy?" And we
Right.
started seeing, Tina Leonard, Mike Caveney, and
Mhm.
John Lovett. Handsome Jack was.
Sure.
I'll tell you a funny story about Handsome Jack. On one of our earliest trips there, maybe the 3rd or 4th time we went, we walked down in the parlor, sat down in the parlor, watched his show, couldn't believe how great and how funny he was.
Mhm.
After the show, we waited politely. Everyone leaves. He's standing around, and we said, "Hey, thank you. We're new members, and we just thought you were great." and in no uncertain terms, dismissive way. Thanks. I'm getting out of magic. So, you probably seen one of the last shows I'm going to do because I'm moving on to do other things. But I'm glad you got to see me and just sort of waved us on. Like we're lucky to catch the last handsome.
Sure, sure.
He had
Well,
at that point was focusing on other career things,
right.
not realizing he was going to stick around in magic, and that we would eventually become what I would call best friends. He probably
Yeah.
too. I would hope so.
Yeah,
Um,
no, and I mean, and it's funny because he suffers from a condescending attitude just in the tone of his voice. I don't even think he can control it, certainly,
no,
but the timbre of his voice is dismissive and condescending, and it's really great because he's such a sweet guy,
yes.
and so great. But that's really funny. I'll be, 20 years later,
Yeah.
he's still doing it.
And now, yeah, he's more in it now than he
Right,
was.
right,
And it's just his nature, and I think he's always been somebody who's been confident and comfortable in his own skin to where that's how he communicates with the
yeah,
world, and he always has, and it's been that's what that you can know and love that about Jack.
right.
Once you realize that what that he's not a warm and fuzzy guy. You're not sitting around.
Yeah, yeah, well, and without going into it certainly in this format, but, if you know of his upbringing, it was not the most conducive to warm and fuzzy. But a wonderful, wonderful guy.
Yes.
But, so you joined up the Magic Castle, and, I mean, did you make a conscious decision that, "Hey, maybe I'm gonna get into magic as a gig?"
Not really, because I was not, and as Jack will tell you, I wasn't great. He saw some of my early, sleight of hand and
Mhm,
things like that, and it wasn't something that I took to right away. It took, about 5 years to figure out what that was gonna be, early on. So Tommy, who's my wife, who was my girlfriend at the
mhm,
time, we're like, "Well, oh, yeah, let's make a magic act. We'll use silent film as our guys. We'll put on heavy makeup, and we'll
mhm.
play Nina Rota music because that's fun in Italian, and we can do a cat and mouse thing, and I'll produce feather flowers and delights, and I'll cut up a newspaper and tear it up, and then I can produce a flower tray where some flowers appear with after some fire, and I don't know, I'll put you in a spell, and we'll run off stage. And so that was the early act, and it was
Mhm.
god awful. Really not good. The pictures look really good. Our promo
Right.
picture was came out pretty nice, but the act itself was pretty abhorrent. But it was the seeds of taking things that I loved, like, say, Nina Rota's music,
Mhm.
or the love of silent film, or Dada, or
Right,
abstract art, and writing it into, "Oh, I can," like Jack did with his character Handsome Jack, "I can write, I can produce, I can
right.
direct, and I can act." And there's not one of us, there's two of us, because I got my girlfriend, wife, because she bailed out of
Sure.
performing, but it's like she liked the writing of it, and we would write these little things, and
Uh-huh.
usually what she thought was funny, the audience would think was funny too, and there I was as the person, performing. So it's kinda like a 2 for 1 in a lot of ways, the
Mhm.
early performances. And then I realized that the more I leaned into the stranger, more aberrant aspects of an odd man performing magic, that
Mhm.
people liked it, and there was like,
Yes.
"Oh, the weirder the better," in some ways. So it was like, I was being rewarded for,
Well,
being specific and odd.
and it's funny you should mention. I mean, I didn't put it together until you said John Waters, but there is so much influence evident in your show that's John Waters influenced, and it's really it's a wonderful it's a wonderful marriage of idea and sensibility and sort of that we really don't know what the fuck this guy's going to do next. You know what I mean?
Thank
There's that, is don't say anything to offend him, and don't give him anything sharp, you know, which is it comes across in and it's so wonderful.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's the element of surprise, I think, is so key as in all art, right? Especially
Mhm.
in music. When I'm surprised in a song, that to me, that is like the greatest day when I'm hearing a song that's going along, and all of a sudden there's something that jumps out, and you're like, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear the song and to see that happen." And Penn and Teller do it all the time. There's so many surprises in their act.
Mhm.
You can't really follow, that linear line. So I think that was, something that I just was very conscious of, and still try to be very much
Mhm.
that
Yeah,
people liked.
it's really great. I mean, and it's because it's the crowd. I mean, I'm speaking from a layperson's point of view too, but the crowd is loving you, but they're scared to death of you. You know what I mean? Which is
Yeah.
such a great, like, razor's edge to walk because you the wrong thing will turn them on you, you
Yes.
know? But you never do that, and then they're like, "Oh, he's our warm and fuzzy psychopath." You know? And
Yeah.
it's such a I mean, I'm sure everyone's told you this for years and you know exactly what you're doing, but for me to see it the first time I saw you was probably early 2000s,
Mm.
with Penn, because Penn raved about you, you know what I mean? And Teller too, but I was hanging out with Penn all the time then, and we did everything. And we were doing stuff for the Aristocrats at that time, and, and he said, "Oh, you gotta see Rob Zabrecky, you gotta see Zabrecky, you gotta see him." And, you know, because Penn can get effusive, and, and he's never let me wrong, you know what I mean? He's never let me down, and I just sat there and it was great. I mean, you're really wonderful,
Thank
and,
you.
so you just decided to do an act, and how do you I mean, from a nuts and bolts perspective, how do you start getting gigs, and who books you, and how do you know what you're doing, and
Yeah. Those are great questions, and they all came together from having a DIY ethos and coming from where I did in music, where it was you booked your own gigs, you made your own
Yep,
flyers, you talked to bands that were of similar ilk, and you tried to get something going. It was the exact same in magic, where I found a small sandbox at the Magic Castle. I'm like, okay, Handsome Jack was one. This guy,
right,
he has the beat. I don't want what he's doing, but I like what he's doing and how he's doing it. And there were some others. There was a guy called Woody Pittman, who was a good character magician.
mhm.
Fitzgerald, another
Oh, yeah,
LA gent, really funny comedy magician. And, at that point, there was another, comedy magician, David Lovering, the drummer from the band The Pixies, uh,
oh, okay,
was kicking around, and Fitzgerald and David Lovering and I had a little group called the Unholy Three, and we would perform comedy magic, and I would put on a guitar, and David would play the drums, and Fitzgerald would do
mhm,
card manipulations, and then David would play a bongo, and I would do something, to music. So we were always kinda, like, playing around with this idea of, like, let's just do our own stuff. And we're
mhm,
up at the Magic Castle at an unpopular time, right around when you said, when you 2002, 2003, nobody's up there. So we're up
right,
there Friday night, burning shows, inviting friends up, and some of those, we're in Hollywood, so there's producers,
right,
there's different people coming up, and,
mhm,
I'm just dipping my toe into acting at this point, so I'm booking some commercials and short films and getting small
mhm,
roles on CSI, stuff like that.
right,
So things were started to kinda go, "Oh, and hey, and would you come do this show for $500 at a, downtown loft or whatever?" So it was the repetition, it was like all these things
yeah,
started
yeah,
stacking up, and that was it, and then pretty quickly, once I figured out the game plan and the rules for the Zabrecky character, which are it's the what I call the Herman Munster theory, which is I'm normal and Jonesy, you are fucking out of your mind crazy.
right,
So the more normal, the more blonde bombshell comes on stage, the cute, jock, those
right.
guys are like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You are you."
Yeah, must be
And
horrible looking like
yeah,
you do.
exactly. Oh my god. So when I figured out that was the Herman Munster thing was like, I've got a map. I can write for this. I can dress for this.
Right,
The
yeah,
the music informs it. I can blare Yoko Ono's "Fly" before I go on it, which is my pre-show music, by
right,
the way. Just turn that on 10
mhm,
and drive some people out of the room because it's making fly noises for
right,
so really drawn to it, and they're like they're electrified by it, so it's very polarizing, but it's specific in that you don't it's surprising, you know?
right,
So establishing the rules and writing a little character bio and going, "Okay, this is someone who sees beauty in dark things," as
mhm,
a thesis, if you will. Bands would have thesis statements without really writing them. You could probably, you know, see one for any musical artist, but in this case, seeing beauty in dark things became like a mantra almost and like something to point to. And okay,
mhm,
I can write for this, I can create for this. And then it just started stacking up. I realized that I like talking about it. And so
mhm,
the creative process, and having come from doing music for 10 years, I started lecturing like pretty early on,
Mhm.
and never like as a, oh, here's a great slide I can show you with the coin, but like
Right.
I can't talk about that shit. I'm no Yngwie Malmsteen, or
Right, right.
I'm not Eddie Van Halen, and nor
Right,
do I
right.
want to be those people. I'm more like the Shags, but
Right.
I'm gonna tell you, but I did it, and I got up here somehow, and here's the keys. So I early on wrote a lecture called the ABZs of Magic, and I
Mhm.
literally go through the alphabet in alphabetical order and
Right.
talk about the process of building an act, and the creative life of a magician, starting with A is for acting and B is for balancing, the architectural
Mhm.
design of how you put together a show. It's which like putting together a set list, or
Right.
where you sneak in all those fun tunes with P&T when you're, throwing in
Yeah,
those
yeah.
melodies, all that kind of stuff, and it's no different. The talk I would give to anyone. I mean, it's a
Mhm.
creative talk. C is for the collaboration process and finding a director, D, and, so on and so forth. So
Right, sure.
I realized that I had something to give, and people like Lovick were saying, yes, there's some value in what you're doing here outside of as a magician. So all the signposts were kind of saying, yeah, do this. There's people like, I mean, Penn and Teller are two of my, biggest influences in magic. And you
Mhm.
see, they're not just doing the show at the Rio. I mean, Penn's in the latest,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
movie,
He's doing
Teller's writing books. I mean, forget it. Like we could,
No, I've said, I mean, I've been, as I said, I've been in the show. This is my 25th year, and I've been around them a lot, and I've never seen 2 guys work harder all the time.
yeah,
They're never not working, and, and the ideas, I mean, you think that, guys that have achieved the level of success that they have, one of the reasons why they're so successful is they've never been content to rest on their laurels. You know what I mean? They didn't come to Vegas 20 years ago to sort of do their greatest hits and retire, you know? I mean,
hell no.
they've written, I mean, I don't know the real number, but if I just do the math in my head, it's like 12 seasons to fool us, 13 new tricks a season. So you think who has written 135, 150 new bits in the past 12 years and performed them, you know? I mean, they never stop. I mean, it's wonderful to be around because, like I said, Penn will say, "Oh, I got a new idea for a trick," and they'll and then they'll say, "Oh, come to the rehearsal. We think we want music for this," you know? And
Yeah.
it's just everything is so when I first was with them, and I mean, nobody cares about this, but it's amazing to be around 2 guys that's so far beyond finishing each other's sentences. You know what I mean? I don't know, the symbiosis or whatever the right word is. I mean, Penn will I was in a meeting with them about a trick, and he said, "Well, I was thinking of doing a variation on this." "Oh, yeah, but if you do that." "Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I was thinking, would you wanna drag it across the." Well, and the whole conversation was that. Most of it was unsaid out loud. They just
Mhm.
knew what the other guy was thinking by just keywords, you know? And I
Yeah.
said, "Wow, you're giving everything away at these meetings." You know? It's, but, uh but no, but anyhow, I get all that, and um, but, you, we were I interrupted you, but, so you were doing lectures and you're doing your now, do you mostly perform all year, or are you still acting and stuff?
Yeah, so it's a combination of things at this
Mhm.
point. I have the Zabrecky Hour that plugs into, a theater on the day of. I can show up and do a week run or a night run or whatever, and that's
Right.
on an as wanted, as needed basis. There's a handful of theaters around the country that will host me to do that. I'm very active in the Magic Castle. For the
Mhm.
past 16 years, I've run the séances up in the Houdini séance
Right.
room, and help write, produce, direct, act, and teach other mediums, and sort of I kind of run that world. And I work with Randy Pitchford pretty
Yep.
closely with his magic team on things that are going on up there. And yeah, I mean, I definitely still want to act and see that as something that is like a big career goal and dream, but it's ongoing. It's all these little successes. It's never been
Right.
one thing or the other. It's just like, I got a book, I'm writing a book about this, and then the other thing's happening. And,
Mhm,
just
mhm.
like you, I'm sure like all creative people that we're career entertainers. So you
Right,
have
right.
peaks, valleys, ups, downs, and just finishing that special and getting that out and going, okay, that was
That's a
20
huge
years.
thing. Yeah,
Now
yeah,
what? Like now I've got like
yeah.
I've got a big, I won't say an open space, but I've got a slot for something that's like, all right,
The next thing.
the next
Right.
dream is going to go right there. And
Yeah.
now using that, the model and the ethos of the hard work that you see Penn and Teller have, and all DIY artists, you
Mhm.
make up, you dream big, and then you try to figure it out, and you use your team, and you have
Yeah.
some version of it, and whether it's shot on your iPhone or you've got Warner Brothers kicking down 20 million for it, or you're putting it up in a coffee house for friends, or on the Pantages stage, like those things all kind of don't matter as much.
No, I said this millions of times on this podcast, but it's one of the things that rings the most true in some Penn said to me very early on, or he didn't say it to me, but he was saying it in reference to something, that there's all one show business. It's all one show business. Whether you're playing on stage at Carnegie Hall or playing a kid's birthday party, it's show business. And it's true. I mean, I never thought I would be in show business. I thought I would be a struggling, miserable jazz musician my whole life. And I'm both. No, I'm lucky. I'm the luckiest jazz musician in the world because I get to play music I want in front of 1,500 people a night,
Yeah.
um, and
I would
make
say you
records.
I'd say you've figured out the key to life. You've won the game of life for
It's I Gray Sargent, who is Tony Bennett's guitarist for 25 years, uh, said it. He doesn't know. I know he said this, but a guy came to see me at the Penn and Teller show, and he said, "Oh, I saw Gray Sargent with Tony Bennett last week, and I mentioned you because I played with Gray for 2 years." And he said, "Oh, best gig in show business." And he's right. I mean, it's wonderful. But well, I'm good. I'm not going to keep you much longer, but I have a very important question for you as a musician. Um, your lovely interpretive dance at the end of the Zabrecky Hour. Who did the music for that?
Thank you for asking. Joe Wong is his name.
It's
LA,
so
LA
great.
musician, and I'll tell you a story about that. For 25 years, I was drawn to Thelonious Monk's Dinah.
Right. Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
Was that track, and the
Yep.
way that it was so angular and strange, and
Yep.
the way that time just it goes in and out of one in ways that
Yep.
are, that to me is that's better than any magic trick you're ever gonna see. And so when I was doing music for the Zabrecky Hour, I realized getting clearance from the Monk estate probably wasn't going to be a walk in the park.
Right.
Rather than do that, I consulted with my friend Joe Wong, who's just put a record on Decca. Actually, Decca's
Oh,
still
wow.
going, wonderful. He does a lot of TV and film work, but also just a brilliant, brilliant
Right.
composer. Gets magic. Really liked the aesthetic of what I was doing. We became friends a while back. Actually, I will give you a plug to Joe Wong because he has a podcast that I know you will love. It's called The Trap Set.
Oh, okay.
And if anyone is listening who likes music,
Yeah, yeah.
Joe Wong's, he's interviewed every famous drummer known to man, and I'm
No
talking
kidding.
from Phil Collins to Terry Bozzio to
Wow.
every rock drummer, jazz drummer.
Wow.
And then he really gets drums. He was a drum teacher, and he's
Mhm.
just and a wonderful human, very good interviewer as well.
Well
So it's great. And the Trap Set is so Joe Wong is the person who has that.
well, it's an incredible piece of music, and
Oh man, I'll tell him.
obviously, you worked with it for a long time because, man, every little gesture you're making that's backed up. I mean, that's part of my little job with Penn and Teller is trying to support I mean, when Teller's doing a bit that's a Teller bit, I'm just writing music to support the bit. But
Mhm.
this is so hip. It's so, yeah, it's so Monk, and it so fits with the jerky movements, and it's just so great, man. It
Well,
just
thank you.
I was so happy seeing that at the end.
That makes me
But
feel good. Thank you. Well, you're
Well
my target audience, I would say.
well, there you go. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on, Rob. It's been so much fun, and we'll do it again if you're up for it because it seems like we left a lot out, but it's you're doing it right. You seem to have your finger on the pulse of how to live. Um,
I appreciate that very
and,
much, and I would say the same thing,
well,
back to you. And this
and
hour went way too quickly. I'd be happy to come back anytime
all
and
right.
chat
Well,
with music
well,
art.
okay. Well, we'll see
And
you
magic in
again.
there. Sorry, I
And
say music because I forgot we're talking about magic too, but
yeah, yeah, yeah,
all
yeah.
things are
Everything.
yeah, everything.